So, back in May of 2003, there were thousands of people who were just quietly bracing for the end of the world.
Yeah, completely terrified.
Right. And they weren't preparing for like nuclear war, and they weren't building bunkers for a normal natural disaster. They were actually waiting for a rogue, undiscovered planet called Nibiru to just violently smash into Earth's orbit.
Which is an incredibly specific doomsday scenario.
It is. And the most startling part is that they believed this whole apocalyptic event was being orchestrated by an ancient race of gold mining extraterrestrial gods, like aliens who originally spliced our DNA hundreds of thousands of years ago.
Right, the Anunnaki.
Exactly. And obviously, May 2003 came and went. The sky didn't fall. The rogue planet never showed up.
Shockingly.
Right. But the really fascinating thing is that the belief in those alien gods didn't die with that failed prediction. Not at all. Instead, it kind of mutated.
It just adapted.
Yeah, it spread way deeper into the internet. And it evolved into this massive, completely contradictory mythology that currently influences, everything from viral TikToks to these really dense, multi-volume alternative history books.
It really is this staggering cultural phenomenon. What started as basically the localized worship of agricultural deities in the muddy river valleys of ancient Mesopotamia has somehow been resurrected in the 21st century as the ultimate science fiction conspiracy theory.
It's wild.
It is. We are looking at a narrative that literally bridges cuneiform tablets from 2100 BCE with alleged telepathic alien downloads happening right now in modern suburban America.
Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. We are tackling a massive, heated, and just endlessly fascinating topic today for you. It's called the Forbidden Anunnaki Message, the End of the World.
It's a big one.
It's a huge one. And to pull this apart, we have a wildly diverse stack of source material to go through. So on the academic side of the table, we are looking at peer-reviewed Mesopotamian scholarship, actual translations of foundational human texts like the Enuma Elish and the Etirhassus epic.
Right, the real historical bedrock.
Exactly, plus linguistic analysis of ancient Sumerian and Akkadian.
But, balancing that out, we also have an enormous mountain of modern fringe literature. We are diving into self-published books, New Age channeling transcripts, vast collections of blog posts.
So many blog posts.
Oh, endless. And of course, the viral video essays that actively promote these ancient astronaut theories and their associated doomsday prophecies.
Right. So our mission here is to essentially trace the entire lifespan of this idea. We really want to understand the mechanics of how a pantheon of ancient nature gods was completely reverse engineered into a spacefaring alien race.
Which takes a lot of creativity, honestly.
It really does. So we are going to separate the rigorous historical scholarship from the modern pseudoscience, and we're going to examine the specific anatomy of this supposed forbidden message.
Yeah.
But the most crucial part of this journey isn't just debunking the mythology for you. We want to understand the profound psychological gravity of these narratives. Why do modern technologically advanced people crave these end-of-the-world stories?
That's the real mystery. What are we looking for when we stare at ancient clay tablets and try so hard to see rocket ships?
Right. But before we cross that bridge, there is a necessary parameter we just need to establish for this discussion.
Yes, definitely. As we move from ancient history into the modern internet era, some of the offshoots of the Anunnaki mythos become heavily entangled with politically charged concepts.
Very heavily.
Yeah. So certain branches of this lore have been appropriated by far-right ideologies, while others serve as the foundation for massive anti-institutional conspiracy theories.
Right.
So we just want to be clear that we are examining these claims purely objectively as cultural and sociological phenomena. We are dissecting the architecture of the belief. We are absolutely not taking political sides, nor are we endorsing any of the viewpoints presented by the original authors of these fringe theories.
Exactly. We are just operating as cultural archaeologists here. And to do that, we really have to start at the actual bedrock. Before the spaceships, before the genetic engineering, there were the people who actually built temples to these beings.
The ancient Mesopotamians.
Right. The Sumerians, the Akkadians, the Babylonians, all living in the cradle of civilization. So let's strip away the modern sci-fi filter completely. In their authentic original context, who were the Anunnaki? Because I'm looking at these academic translations, and there is not a single mention of anything extraterrestrial.
No, not even a hint of it. To really grasp the authentic Anunnaki, we have to look closely at the etymology of the word itself.
Okay, let's break that down.
So in the Sumerian language, Anunnaki is derived from the phrase Anaki. An translates to heaven, and Ki translates to earth.
Heaven and earth.
Right. And linguistically, scholars interpret the full term to essentially mean princely offspring or those of royal blood. They were literally the descendants of An, the supreme god of the heavens, and Ki, the goddess of the earth.
Okay, so that sounds like a foundational pantheon, very similar to like the Titans or the Olympians in Greek mythology, just significantly older.
It is the exact same concept, yeah. In the earliest cuneiform texts, which date back past 2100 BCE, the Anunnaki are described as the most powerful deities in the Sumerian worldview.
Right, the top tier.
Exactly. Scholars like Thorkild Jacobson, who basically spent his entire life studying Mesopotamian religion, he notes that the Anunnaki often numbered 50 great gods. And within that 50, there were 7 supreme judges who acted as the ultimate arbiters of human and divine destiny.
Wow, so there's a whole hierarchy. And the dynamics between those top tier gods are really what drive the mythology. You have Anu, who is the distant sky father who rarely interacts with the earth.
He's very hands-off.
Very hands-off. Then you have Enlil, the god of air and storms. And, reading about Enlil, he comes across as the ultimate taskmaster.
Oh, absolutely.
He is basically the chief executive on Earth. He's completely obsessed with order, hierarchy, and just keeping the cosmic machinery running efficiently. And he has zero patience for anything that disrupts his domain.
Right. He is very strict. But then you contrast that with Enki, the god of fresh water, wisdom, and magic.
Enki's my favorite.
He's the most dynamic, for sure. Enki is deeply tethered to the earth itself. He is associated with the subterranean aquifer, the Absu, which the Sumerians believed was the source of all fresh water.
Okay.
So Enki is the just plain problem solver. He's the tinkerer, the master craftsman of the gods.
So, looking at how they function together, it feels less like a mystical, ethereal religion and more like a deeply dysfunctional corporate management structure.
That is a brilliant way to look at it, actually.
I mean, if we run with that analogy, Anu is the absentee CEO who just stays up in the penthouse. Enlil is the aggressive COO managing the factory floor, demanding productivity, and punishing the workers when they step out of line.
Right, he's tracking everybody's metrics.
Exactly. And Enki acts as this strange combination of the head of R&D and the sympathetic HR director. He's the one actually figuring out how to build the products, and he secretly has a soft spot for the workforce.
That analogy captures the theology perfectly. Because the Mesopotamian gods were highly bureaucratic. They weren't these abstract concepts of pure love or pure evil.
They just had jobs.
They had jobs to do. They had to maintain the me, spelled M-E, pronounced me.
Oh, the mat. That's such an interesting concept in the sources.
It is a fascinating concept.
Okay.
The me essentially represents the fundamental laws of the universe.
Oh.
It's the decrees that govern everything from the movement of the stars to the art of basket weaving, kingship, warfare. It's basically the software code of civilization.
And maintaining that software code required actual physical effort from the gods, which leads us to the creation of humanity.
Right, this is where it gets gritty.
Yeah. The sources pull heavily from an Akkadian text called the Atrahasis epic, which was written around 1700 BCE. And the opening lines of this epic are incredibly striking. It sets the scene before humans even existed, and it is not a paradise.
Not at all.
It's a labor camp.
It really is. The Atrahasis epic opens with the gods themselves being forced to perform all the grueling physical labor required to keep the earth functioning.
Like actual farming and digging.
Exactly. Specifically, a lesser tier of deities, called the Igigi, are the blue-collar workers. The text describes them digging the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, clearing out massive irrigation canals, and farming the land. They are exhausted.
I mean, digging rivers by hand.
Yeah. The epic states that for 40 periods, which in their context signifies an unbearably long time, they suffered under this back-breaking workload. And finally, the Igigi just reached a breaking point.
They unionized and went on strike.
They literally did. The text describes the Igigi burning their tools in the middle of the night, marching on Enlil's grand temple and basically surrounding it. They demanded immediate relief from their labor.
I can just imagine Enlil, the strict COO, absolutely losing his mind over a labor revolt. Like, he probably wanted to destroy them all right there just to make an example of them.
Oh, he definitely wanted to punish them severely. But Anu, the CEO, recognized that, the work still needed to get done. And the Igigi were simply pushed too far.
You can't fire your entire workforce.
Right. And this is where Enki, the master craftsman, steps forward with a brilliant, albeit very dark, solution. He proposes the creation of a new, lesser being to essentially bear the yoke of the gods.
Okay, so this is where humanity comes in.
Yes. But to achieve this, Enki and the mother goddess, Ninhursag, require specific materials.
And this is where the Sumerian view of human origins gets incredibly visceral. They don't just speak humanity into existence with a magic word. It's a manufacturing process.
A very messy one. They take clay from the earth. But clay alone isn't enough. It needs to be animated with divine essence.
Right.
So the gods actually slaughter one of the rebel Ijiki leaders, a god named A-Ilu, who is described in the text as having intelligence. They bleed A-Ilu out, and they mix his divine blood and his intelligence into the clay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And from this bloody, muddy mixture, the first humans are formed.
The psychological weight of that origin story is staggering for you to think about. I mean, if you were an ancient Sumerian hearing this epic, your entire existence is defined by servitude.
Completely.
You weren't created out of love, and you weren't created to inherit the earth or rule it. You were created to be a servant-slave population designed specifically to take over the heavy lifting so the gods could rest.
That's it. That's your purpose.
Your purpose is to feed them through agricultural offerings and ritual sacrifices. You are a biological machine built for a singular task.
That was the foundational reality of their religion. Humanity was an agricultural tool. And, just like any tool, if it becomes annoying or defective, it can be discarded.
Right.
Which brings us to the famous Mesopotamian flood narrative, which is heavily detailed in both the Etrasis epic and the Epic of Gilgamesh.
Right. So humans were designed to work, but we were also designed to reproduce. And apparently we were entirely too successful at it. The human population explodes, and we just start making a massive amount of noise.
The noise is the critical factor
Oh,
here.
really? It's just noise.
Yes. The texts explicitly state that the clamor of humanity became so deafening that Enlil couldn't sleep. The COO is exhausted, irritated by the factory noise, and decides the entire project is a failure.
Over a headache.
Basically. So without even consulting the rest of the Pantheon properly, Enlil decides to wipe the slate clean with a catastrophic, world-ending deluge. And to ensure no one escapes, he forces all the great gods, including Enki, to take a sacred oath of silence. No god is allowed to warn a single human.
But Enki loves his creations. I mean, he is the R&D guy who spent all that time perfecting the clay mixture, and he refuses to see his work destroyed just because his boss has a headache.
Right, he's proud of his work.
So he finds this brilliant legal loophole in his divine contract.
The loophole is a masterpiece of mythological storytelling.
Yeah.
So, bound by his oath not to speak directly to any human, Enki descends to Earth and approaches the reed hut of a devout, intelligent man named Utnapishtim, or Atrahasis, depending on the specific translation you're reading.
Right.
So Enki doesn't speak to the man. Instead, he speaks to the wall of the hut. He literally says, "Reed wall, listen to my words. Tear down your house, build a boat, abandon your wealth, and seek your life."
He's technically just talking to a pile of reeds, completely honoring his vow of silence.
Exactly. He didn't break the rules. But Utnapishtim hears the message through the wall. He follows the instructions, builds the massive multi-tiered vessel, loads it with the seed of all living things, and survives the deluge. And when the floodwaters recede, Utnapishtim offers a sacrifice. The gods smell the sweet savor of the roasting meat, and they suddenly realize they almost starved themselves to death by destroying their only food source.
Whoops.
Right. And Lilies is furious at first, of course, but eventually concedes that humanity must remain. Though he does institute new plagues, barrenness, and predators to kind of keep the population in check from then on.
It's just an epic cinematic narrative, and it clearly serves as the architectural blueprint for later traditions, particularly the biblical story of Noah.
Absolutely.
But stepping back from the story itself, the crucial takeaway from all of this peer-reviewed academic history is the nature of these gods. The Anunnaki of the ancient world were intimately, permanently tethered to the dirt, the rivers, and the crops.
We're very grounded.
Very. They were physical, they lived in the ziggurat temples in the center of the cities, and they relied on human labor for their survival.
Yes, and what is profoundly absent from the hundreds of thousands of recovered cuneiform tablets is any trace of a cosmic departure.
No spaceship.
No spaceships. The Mesopotamians possessed a cyclical worldview, heavily dependent on the changing of the seasons and the flooding of the rivers. Their religious rituals were entirely focused on maintaining the fragile status quo.
Keeping things normal.
Yeah. There is no concept of a distant homeworld, no descriptions of genetic engineering as we understand the science, and absolutely no prophecy predicting the end of the world.
Because the end of the world is a linear concept, right? It's a story with a definitive finish line. The Sumerians were just trying to keep the wheel spinning.
Exactly.
So the glaring question for you as the listener is, how did we get here? If the rigorous linguistic reality proves that the Anunnaki were just localized, moody nature gods demanding grain sacrifices, how on earth did an entire subculture of the modern world become convinced that they are astronauts?
It's a huge leap.
It's massive. How do we jump from a god of fresh water whispering to a reed wall to an alien scientist in a sterile laboratory splicing DNA?
Well, that leap is almost entirely the work of one man. To understand the mutation of this myth, we have to leave the ancient sands of Iraq, fast forward thousands of years, and basically drop into the year 1976. We have to examine the architect of the modern Anunnaki mythos, Zecharia Sitchin.
Oh man, Zecharia Sitchin. He is the gravitational center of this entire phenomenon. You cannot spend more than 5 minutes on a fringe history forum without hitting his name.
He is everywhere in those circles.
Sitchin was an author and a self-taught scholar of ancient languages. And in 1976, he released a book titled The 12th Planet. And this book didn't just add to the ancient astronaut theory, it completely revolutionized it.
It did, because prior to Sitchin, figures like Erich von Däniken had made the ancient astronaut theory popular with books like Chariots of the Gods. But von Däniken's work was highly fragmented.
Very loose.
Yeah, he would point to the pyramids, then point to a strange carving in South America, and just vaguely gesture at the sky and say, aliens did it. What made Sitchin revolutionary was his incredibly detailed, chronological, and structurally cohesive world building. He provided an origin story, a homeworld, a motive, and a biological timeline.
I want to break down Sitchin's grand narrative step by step because the sheer scale of the fiction is impressive. The entire theory hinges on a rogue planet. What is the astronomical pitch in the 12th planet?
So Sitchin proposed that our solar system harbors a massive, undiscovered planet, which he called the 12th planet, because he claimed the Sumerians counted the sun and the moon alongside the traditional planets.
Okay.
He identified this planet as Nibiru. According to his calculations, Nibiru operates on a massive, highly elliptical orbit that flings it deep into the outer solar system, only returning to the inner solar system once every 3,600 years.
And he had a term for that, right?
Yes. He claimed the Sumerians called this orbital period Ashar.
Got it. And Nibiru is the home world of the Anunnaki. But they didn't just come to Earth on a sightseeing tour, they had a massive environmental crisis on their hands.
Correct. Sitchin asserted that roughly 450,000 years ago, Nibiru's atmosphere began to deteriorate severely, threatening all life on the planet.
That's familiar.
Very. And their scientific solution to this was to mine enormous quantities of gold, atomize it, and suspend it in their atmosphere to act as a reflective shield against cosmic radiation. However, Nibiru didn't have enough gold.
But Earth did.
But Earth did. So an expeditionary force of Anunnaki travels to Earth. Sitchin claims they established mining operations in southeastern Africa, and they built their primary command center and spaceport in Mesopotamia.
Wow.
He even went so far as to claim that the biblical Garden of Eden, the Eden, was actually the Sumerian acronym for this original extraterrestrial base.
Wait, really? He made Eden an acronym?
He did. It is a masterful blending of myth and sci-fi tropes. Sitchin then incorporates the Atrahasis epic into his timeline, but he completely scripts away the theological context.
Right, he reframes it.
Exactly. In Sitchin's translation, the Igigis aren't minor deities anymore. They are the blue-collar alien astronauts who were forced into the deep, dangerous African gold mines. And after centuries of grueling labor, they mutiny.
And this is where his take on human origins pivots into pure biotechnology. Enki, the alien chief scientist, realizes they still need the gold, but they need a labor force that won't rebel. So he looks around the African plains and sees Homo erectus, early hominids that are native to Earth.
Right, and Sitchin claims that Enki took the DNA of the Anunnaki and artificially spliced it with the DNA of Homo erectus.
It's just casual genetic engineering.
Yeah. The goal was to accelerate evolution, creating a hybridized worker that was smart enough to use tools and follow orders, but docile enough to accept their enslavement. That hybrid was Homo sapiens. Us.
So we are the slave race in this version too.
Yes, and Sitchin further argued that when the Book of Genesis refers to the Nephilim and the Elohim, it's actually using plural terms to describe these alien scientists.
He basically re-engineered the entire biblical fall of man. In Sitchin's universe, the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden wasn't a test of morality. It was a secondary genetic upgrade.
Yes, that's exactly how he framed it.
He claimed Enki altered human DNA a second time to allow us to sexually reproduce, which infuriated Enlil, the rigid alien commander who wanted to keep tight control over the slave population.
Right. Enlil did not want us breeding independently, and that anger eventually leads to Sitchin's version of the flood. He says Enlil uses the natural gravitational disruption caused by Nibiru's passing to trigger massive tidal waves, hoping to wipe out the hybridized human slaves.
I mean, it reads like the plot Bible for a massive Hollywood sci-fi franchise.
It really does.
And here is the genius of Sitchin's approach. He presented this narrative wrapped in the aesthetic of rigorous academic scholarship.
This is key.
Like, you open the 12th planet, and you aren't just reading prose. You are hit with complex astronomical charts, detailed linguistic breakdowns of Sumerian cuneiform, and pages of mathematical equations calculating planetary orbits. To the layperson with no background in Assyriology, it looks incredibly authoritative.
Academics refer to this tactic as employing scientific aesthetics. It is basically the visual language of science used to camouflage fiction.
That's a great term.
But the thing is, when actual linguists, astronomers, and historians examine Sitchin's work, the facade instantly crumbles. The academic refutation of Zecharia Sitchin is not a debate. It is a universal, absolute rejection.
I want to dig into the mechanics of that debunking. What exactly is Sitchin doing with the language that infuriates scholars so deeply? Like, how does he force the cuneiform to say what he wants it to say?
Well, Dr. Michael Heiser, who is a highly credentialed scholar of biblical and ancient Near Eastern languages, has spent years meticulously dismantling Sitchin's linguistic claims. Sitchin's primary technique was to strip words of their context and force modern technological definitions onto them.
Can you give an example?
The most famous example is his treatment of the Sumerian word Shem.
Right, Sitchin heavily relies on the word Shem to prove the Anunnaki had spaceships.
Exactly. Sitchin claims that Shem literally translates to rocket ship or sky vehicle. He uses this to argue that whenever ancient texts mention a king raising a Shem, they're actually talking about launching a spacecraft.
Okay, but what does it actually mean?
Linguistically, Shem translates to monument, name, or reputation. When an ancient king built a Shem, he was erecting a stone, steel, or a pillar to ensure his name was remembered.
Oh, wow. That is a staggering leap in logic. Going from the king built a stone pillar to honor his legacy to the king fueled up the Saturn V rocket requires completely ignoring the surrounding context of the entire culture.
Completely. And that lack of context is everywhere in his work. Let's look at his astronomical claims. Sitchin constantly pointed to a specific Akkadian cylinder seal known as VA-243, which is housed in a museum in Berlin.
I've seen pictures of this one.
Yeah, it's very famous in these circles. The seal features a seated god, and between two standing figures, there's a carving of a star surrounded by 11 smaller dots. Sitchin published this image everywhere, claiming it was an ancient depiction of the sun surrounded by all the planets in our solar system, plus Nibiru and the moon. Right. He argued this proved the Sumerians had advanced extraterrestrial astronomical knowledge.
It looks like a smoking gun to a casual observer. A star in the middle, dots all around it. How do academics explain that image?
By understanding Mesopotamian art conventions, experts point out that the central symbol on VA-243 is not the sun. In Mesopotamian iconography, the sun god Shamash has a very specific symbol. It's a four-pointed star with wavy lines radiating between the points.
Oh, so they had a standardized way of drawing the sun.
Exactly. And the symbol on VA-243 is just a generic star which was constantly used as a background filler motif to indicate the heavens.
So what are the dots?
The dots around it aren't planets. They are just other stars like the Pleiades or purely decorative elements. Sitchin ignored the standardized visual language of the culture to basically invent an astronomical map that didn't exist.
So there is absolutely no cuneiform evidence for a rogue planet called Nibiru with a 3,600-year orbit.
None. In fact, the word Nibiru does exist in ancient texts, but it isn't a planet. It translates to crossing or point of transition, and was often used as a title for the god Marduk or the planet Jupiter when it reached a specific point in the night sky.
Okay, so a marker.
Right, it was a navigational or astronomical marker, not a physical homeworld. Sitchin essentially built an elaborate linguistic house of cards.
And what's fascinating is how his writing style evolved as he kept building. Because Sitchin didn't just write one book, he wrote an entire series. Our source material points to this brilliant analysis from a Leiden University research paper that tracks Sitchin's methodology over time.
Yes, that paper makes a crucial distinction. In his early work, the 7-volume Earth Chronicles series, Sitchin relies on what the researchers call rational appeals. Even though his logic is flawed, he is attempting to play by the rules of academia. He presents a hypothesis, shows his pseudo-evidence, and tries to convince you logically.
Right, pretending to do the science.
Exactly. But in 2001, he published The Lost Book of Enki, and his methodology shifted entirely to charismatic appeals.
I read excerpts from The Lost Book of Enki, and it's jarring. It's written in the first person. Sitchin frames the entire book as if he discovered and translated 14 secret clay tablets dictated directly by the alien god Enki himself.
He just skips the academic part entirely.
He drops the pretense of being a historian and just becomes a prophet transmitting the words of a deity.
It functions as a pseudo-scriptural text. He relies on his established charismatic authority to bypass evidence entirely. I mean, if Enki is speaking directly, you don't need a linguistic breakdown. But the most interesting element of The Lost Book of Enki is the introduction of a new, highly revealing character, a mysterious entity named Galzu.
Wait, who is Galzu? If Enlil and Enki are the top of the alien command chain, where does Galzu fit in?
Galzu is presented as a mystical emissary from the creator of all. In Sitchin's narrative, Galzu appears to the Anunnaki in visions and dreams. He delivers prophecies and steers their actions.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, by introducing Galzu, Sitchin dramatically alters his own universe. The Anunnaki are no longer just highly advanced technological astronauts acting on their own free will. They're suddenly subjected to a higher supernatural destiny.
That completely shifts the genre. He moves the story from hard science fiction into mystical theology. He re-enchants his own sci-fi universe.
That's a perfect way to phrase it.
And this shift is the crucial bridge to the next major question. So far, everything Sitchin wrote was about the past. It's an alternative history of how we got here. But how does this alternative history mutate into an apocalyptic prediction of the future? Why did people in 2003 think these ancient miners were coming back to kill us?
Well, the apocalyptic nature of the Anunnaki myth is baked right into the mathematics of Sitchin's theory. Think about the core premise. Nibiru operates on a fixed 3,600-year elliptical orbit.
Right.
It functions like a cosmic pendulum. Because he established a precise, repeating timeline for their past visits, ancient history inherently transforms into a ticking clock for the future. If they arrived on a schedule, simple logic dictates that they, or at least their planet, will return on that same schedule. The past becomes a prophecy.
Oh, that's brilliant. I mean, horribly brilliant. By defining the orbit, he inadvertently, or perhaps intentionally, created a permanent doomsday calendar. It guarantees that the story is never truly over.
Exactly. And this chronological inevitability gives birth to the central concept of our deep dive, the forbidden message.
Let's talk about that.
The foundation of the forbidden message is the absolute conviction that a terminal global event is rapidly approaching, triggered by the gravitational chaos of Nibiru's return or the physical arrival of the Anunnaki, and that this reality is being systematically hidden from the public.
The idea that the most important event in human history is being actively suppressed. Who is doing the suppressing in this narrative?
The antagonists of the forbidden message are the bastions of mainstream epistemic authority. It is NASA hiding the telemetry data. It is the Vatican locking away true translations in their secret archives.
Of course. Always the Vatican archives.
Always. It is the global elite, the shadow governments, who are secretly building deep underground bunkers to survive the crossing of Nibiru while leaving the rest of humanity on the surface to perish in the tidal waves.
The mythology empowers the believer to look at literally any empty space in the sky or any redacted government document and just fill it with Nibiru.
Yes.
But this isn't just a vague feeling of impending doom. Believers have tried to nail this down to very specific dates, and tracing those failed predictions reveals exactly how adaptable this myth is.
The timeline of failed Nibiru predictions is essential to understanding the psychology at play here. The most prominent early prediction came from a woman named Nancy Leader.
Right, in the 90s.
In the late 1990s, Leader founded a website called Zeta Talk. She claimed she had been chosen as a contactee by benevolent, gray-skinned extraterrestrials from the Zeta Reticuli star system.
And how was she getting her information? Was she also reading ancient tablets like Sitchin?
No, her method was entirely different. She claimed the Zetas had placed a physical implant in her brain that allowed for direct telepathic communication.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Through these downloads, Leader announced that Nibiru, which she referred to as Planet X, was hurtling toward the inner solar system and would pass agonizingly close to Earth in May of 2003.
What were the supposed consequences of that passing? Like, what was going to happen?
She predicted a catastrophic physical pole shift. The magnetic and gravitational pull of Nibiru would cause the Earth's crust to violently detach from the mantle.
Just peel right off.
Basically, Continents would shatter, oceans would sweep over the land masses, and civilization would be instantly annihilated. She instructed her followers to move to specific safe zones and prepare for the total collapse of the food chain.
The specificity of that is terrifying if you genuinely believe it. You have people uprooting their lives, living in absolute dread of May 2003. But May 2003 arrives, the sky is clear, and the world keeps spinning. What happens to the belief system when the apocalypse doesn't show up for its appointment?
Sociologically, failed prophecies rarely destroy a dedicated belief system. They usually just refine it.
Really?
Yeah. When May 2003 passed, Leader claimed the date was a white lie, formulated by the aliens to trick the global elite and force them to reveal their hidden agendas.
Oh, that is a convenient pivot.
Very convenient. But the broader Anunnaki community simply detached the doomsday from Leader and searched for a new date.
They just moved the goalposts. And they didn't have to look far because popular culture was already obsessing over the year 2012 and the end of the Mayan long count calendar.
Yes, the Nibiru narrative seamlessly merged with the 2012 Mayan apocalypse panic. Fringe authors started arguing that the Mayans inherited their astronomical knowledge directly from the Anunnaki, and that December 21st, 2012 was the true date of the orbital return.
Even Sitchin himself felt the need to weigh in on this, didn't he? He was still alive during this massive surge in his theory's popularity. Did he endorse the 2003 or 2012 dates?
Sitchin actually rejected both of those dates.
Oh, he did?
Yes. In 2007, he published a book titled The End of Days, attempting to calculate the true return using his own established math. He argued that the last time Nibiru passed through the inner solar system was in 556 BCE. Therefore, adding a 3,600-year SHR, the planet wouldn't naturally return until roughly the year 2900.
2900. That completely deflates the urgency.
Yeah.
I mean, if the apocalypse is 900 years away, you don't need to buy canned beans and build a bunker.
Sitchin realized that predicting a doomsday, a millennium in the future, doesn't sell books. So he included a massive caveat.
Of course he did.
He argued that while the planet wouldn't return until 2900, the Anunnaki themselves might travel ahead via spacecraft to coincide with the astrological shift from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, which he placed somewhere between the years 2090 and 2370. He kept the threat alive, just lightly over the horizon.
But the internet didn't want to wait for Sitchin's math. The digital age demands immediate content. When 2012 failed, YouTube algorithms pushed a new viral date for September 2015, linking the blood moon tetrad to Nibiru. When 2015 passed, it jumped to 2017, then to 2021. And to legitimize these constantly shifting dates, modern proponents often point back to actual Mesopotamian omen texts, claiming they are reading the secret Anunnaki warning signs.
This is a critical point where historical context is basically weaponized.
Yeah.
They point to massive ancient omen collections like the Enuma Anu Enlil, which consists of 70 tablets detailing thousands of celestial signs.
Right.
A fringe video will quote a tablet saying, "The sky will fall and the earth will shake," and present it as a locked-in deterministic prophecy of the end times.
But if we look at how the ancient Babylonians actually used those omens, the function was completely different. It wasn't a doomsday clock. It was an ancient warning system.
Precisely. The academic research clarifies that Mesopotamian omens were conditional statements. They were formulated as, if X occurs, then Y will happen.
Like an if-then statement in coding.
Exactly. For example, if Jupiter enters the Crab constellation, the crops will fail. Or, if a solar eclipse occurs on this specific day, the king will die. These omens were compiled by elite astronomer priests who were advising the royal court.
But the key word is conditional. If the priests saw the omen, they didn't just sit down and accept their doom, they took action.
They immediately executed counter-rituals, which were known as Namburbi. The Mesopotamians believed the gods sent the omens as a courtesy warning. If you read the sign, you could perform a ritual to appease the gods and avert the disaster.
Right, there was a workaround.
Yes, and the most extreme example of this was the Sharpui, or the substitute king ritual.
This part of the sources blew my mind.
It is wild. If an eclipse predicted the king's death, they would temporarily place a commoner on the throne. They would treat him as king for a few months to absorb the bad fate and then execute him, allowing the real king to resume his rule safely.
It's like a cosmic loophole.
It is. The omens were actionable intelligence meant to prevent disaster, not inescapable prophecies of global annihilation.
That distinction is incredibly revealing. Ancient people used the stars to figure out how to keep their society running. Modern fringe theorists use the stars to figure out when society is going to collapse. Which actually brings me to the word that anchors this entire phenomenon: forbidden.
Yes.
Why do proponents insist on branding this information as the forbidden message? What psychological purpose does that specific word serve?
Sociologically, labeling a theory as forbidden, suppressed, or hidden is a brilliant rhetorical defense mechanism. It creates an immediate, impenetrable persecution narrative.
Walk me through how that defense mechanism works in an actual debate.
Imagine you were debating a Nibiru believer. You present Dr. Heiser's linguistic evidence proving Shem means monument, not rocket ship. You present NASA's astronomical data proving a planet with a 3,600-year orbit would destabilize the inner solar system and eject the Earth into deep space.
Real hard data.
Right. But the believer doesn't have to engage with your physics or your linguistics. They simply dismiss you by saying, "Of course NASA says that. NASA is part of the cover-up. Of course the academics disagree. They are paid by the elite to hide the truth."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the forbidden label turns every single piece of debunking evidence into proof of the conspiracy. It makes the theory entirely unfalsifiable.
It's an intellectual fortress. But it does more than just protect the theory, I think. It elevates the believer. There is a deeply intoxicating feeling, Gnosticism, that comes with believing you hold a secret truth.
Absolutely.
Gnosticism is that visceral rush you get when you think you are the only person in the room who knows the magic trick is fake. It separates the enlightened you from the ignorant sheep who are blindly trusting the news. In a world that constantly makes us feel small and uninformed, possessing the forbidden message grants you elite cosmic status.
That desire for cosmic status is a powerful motivator. But when you look at the relentless cycle of failed predictions, 2003, 2012, 2015, 2021, the truly provocative question isn't why the predictions fail. The question is why anyone looking at the world right now, wants these apocalyptic predictions to be true.
Right. Why do we crave a reset? When you look at the state of the world, the economic pressure, the political vitriol, the sheer exhaustion of modern life, the idea of a giant fiery reset button hitting the earth almost feels like a relief.
Let's just escape.
It is. An apocalypse absolves you of your mortgage, your career anxieties, and your political tribalism. It clears the board.
That craving for a grand reset is a recognized sociological condition. And that condition didn't evaporate when Zecharia Sitchin died in 2010. Instead, his narrative was just released into the wild of the internet. Freed from his specific mathematical timeline, the Anunnaki theory fractured. It mutated rapidly, absorbing a bizarre array of other modern anxieties. Which brings us to the concept of the cultic milieu.
The cultic milieu. That sounds like a clinical term for the dark, strange corners of the internet where reality just goes to bend.
It is the academic framework for those spaces, yeah. The term was coined by British sociologist Colin Campbell in 1972. Campbell defined the cultic milieu as a cultural space united by one core characteristic: the absolute rejection of mainstream epistemic authority.
Meaning they don't trust the official story on anything.
Exactly. Yeah. In this space, orthodox science, traditional academia, and mainstream religion are all viewed as corrupt or compromised.
So if you reject the mainstream, you have to build your own reality.
Right. The cultic milieu is populated by seekers, individuals who are constantly looking for hidden truths. And because they reject traditional boundaries, they effortlessly blend vastly different belief systems together. This blending is called syncretism.
Okay.
You can take elements of ufology, mix it with Eastern mysticism, add a dash of quantum physics buzzwords, and tie it all together with ancient Sumerian gods.
And the Anunnaki became the ultimate syncretic sponge. They basically absorbed every conspiracy they touched. To see how wildly this myth mutated, we have to look at the extremes. On one end of the spectrum, we have the darkest, most fear-based mutation of the theory, popularized by David Icke.
Yes.
How did Icke take Sitchin's ancient astronauts and turn them into the architects of modern global suffering?
So David Icke, who is a British conspiracy theorist, took Sitchin's humanoid Anunnaki and performed a radical syncretic leap. He merged the Anunnaki with older, deeply entrenched anti-institutional conspiracies. Icke claimed that the Anunnaki weren't just humanoid aliens, they were an interdimensional, shape-shifting reptilian race.
That's Childs. He literally introduced a lizard aesthetic to the Mesopotamian gods. How did he even explain the mechanics of shape-shifting?
He uses pseudoscientific language, claiming it operates on vibrational frequencies. According to Icke's offshoot theory, these reptilian Anunnaki reside in the lower fourth dimension. Yep. They manipulate our three-dimensional reality by possessing the bloodlines of the global elite. He calls this elite structure the Babylonian Brotherhood.
Wow.
Yeah, Ick claims that world leaders, prominent bankers, and media moguls are either literal shape-shifting reptiles or humans possessed by them.
I just want to remind you, as we dive into this part, we must maintain our objective lens here. But the academic sources heavily emphasize that Ick's specific offshoot borrows heavily from historical, politically charged tropes.
It really does.
His narrative of a secretive, blood-drinking cabal controlling global finance is structurally identical to older, very dangerous conspiracies, specifically the anti-Semitic fabrications found in the protocols of the Elders of Zion. Ick simply swapped out the human antagonist for reptilian aliens, which kind of allowed him to bypass immediate accusations of prejudice while keeping the paranoid structure intact.
It is a vital sociological observation to make. Ick's mythology asserts that these reptilian beings literally feed off of human fear, anxiety, and negative energy, which goes loosh. Therefore, the Anunnaki require humanity to live in a perpetual Orwellian state of war, economic panic, and division just to sustain their food supply. It is a profoundly bleak, paranoid worldview where literally every tragedy is engineered by lizards in suits.
But the cultic milieu is entirely contradictory, because if you step out of the paranoid conspiracy forums and walk into the New Age spiritual communities on the internet, the Anunnaki are portrayed in the exact opposite light. Depending on which algorithm feeds you, the Anunnaki are the saviors of humanity.
The New Age interpretation is a fascinating pivot. In these communities, figures like Elena Danaan and Janet Kira-Lessin have developed vast, incredibly complex lore where the Anunnaki, or at least specific factions of them, are benevolent ancestors.
Our sources detail Elena Danaan's narrative, and it reads like high fantasy. She splits the Anunnaki into opposing factions, reviving the ancient Enlil versus Enki dynamic but projecting it onto a galactic scale.
Yes, Danaan claims to be in telepathic contact with a galactic federation of worlds. In her lore, Enlil represents the oppressive, regressive faction of the Anunnaki that wants to keep humanity enslaved in a matrix of ignorance, but Enki represents the benevolent seeders.
Okay, Enki to the rescue again.
Always. Danaan has recently claimed that Enki has actually returned to our solar system in a massive leather ship, bringing with him the true Holy Grail.
And in her lore, the Holy Grail isn't a cup, it's biological.
She defines the Holy Grail as the original uncorrupted Adamic DNA template. She claims Enki is transmitting specific frequencies to Earth to activate junk DNA in humanity, unlocking telepathy, self-healing, and higher dimensional consciousness, ultimately freeing us from Enlil's slave programming.
It's wild. The followers of this narrative often refer to themselves as starseeds, right? Believing they literally carry dormant extraterrestrial DNA that makes them spiritually advanced. You have thousands of people listening to channeling sessions online, where a practitioner closes their eyes, alters their voice, and claims to be transmitting real-time messages from the Sumerian goddess Nimma, offering spiritual comfort and promising an imminent ascension to the fifth dimension.
The contrast is just jarring. You have one side of the internet terrified of blood-drinking reptiles orchestrating financial crashes, and the other side doing meditation retreats to receive DNA upgrades from glowing space parents. But both sides are using the exact same Sumerian nouns.
That contradiction is the key to understanding the entire modern phenomenon. It proves that the Anunnaki are no longer historical figures. They aren't even consistent sci-fi characters anymore. They are an entirely blank canvas.
And the internet just paints whatever it wants on that canvas.
Exactly. But the mechanism of how these wildly different stories spread so effectively is tied directly to the aesthetics of the digital age.
The structural features of modern digital media are uniquely designed to bypass critical thinking and elevate emotional resonance. When you engage with this content, you aren't reading a dry, peer-reviewed paper on Assyriology. You are experiencing an aesthetic dramatization.
I've watched some of these viral video essays, and the production value is hypnotic.
Oh, highly produced.
It always starts with this deep, pulsing, ambient synthesizer music, often claiming to be attuned to 432 hertz to somehow interact with your brainwaves. And the narrator speaks in a calm, incredibly confident, authoritative tone. Visually, the camera is slowly panning across gorgeous AI-generated starscapes, cutting to ominous public domain NASA footage of the sun, and then lingering on highly dramatized, glowing images of giant Sumerian gods holding modern-looking technology. It's really designed to induce a trance state.
Researchers actually note that this combination of hypnotic audio and visually arresting imagery puts the viewer in a passive, absorptive state. You aren't critically evaluating the claims, you are just experiencing the atmosphere of the mystery. And to keep the audience hooked, The creators constantly manufacture new digital evidence. The lore must always be expanding.
The ultimate example of manufacturing evidence has to be the face on Mars.
Oh, classic. In 1976, the Viking 1 spacecraft photographed the Cydonia region on Mars. One of the images captured a mesa with shadows that vaguely resembled a human face. NASA immediately released the photo, explaining it was a trick of light and shadow, a psychological phenomenon called pareidolia, where the brain finds faces in random patterns.
Right, like seeing a bunny in the clouds.
Exactly. And decades later, high-resolution satellite imagery proved it was just a flat, eroded mesa.
But the cultic milieu completely ignored the high-resolution photos. Fringe theorists integrated the original blurry photo straight into the Anunnaki lore. They claimed it was a colossal monument built by the Anunnaki 450,000 years ago as a waypoint space station while they were transporting gold from Earth back to Nibiru.
They adapt literally everything to fit the narrative. And there are much more recent examples of this constant syncretism. Our sources highlight a highly publicized 2015 UFO encounter in Georgia, in the United States.
What happened there?
Military witnesses claimed a massive triangular craft hovered over them and transmitted a complex binary code directly into their minds telepathically.
Let me guess. They didn't translate the binary code into a simple hello from Zeta Reticuli. They translated it into Sumerian.
You guessed it. The online UFO community decoded the binary and claimed it translated into phonetic Sumerian. The message allegedly referenced the impending return of an Anunnaki messenger and contained warnings about hidden cosmic knowledge.
It is a never-ending recycling of ancient vocabulary to legitimize modern anxieties. And that really brings us to the most vital, relatable part of this deep dive for you, the sociocultural mirror. It's fascinating that the internet can simultaneously sustain a belief in evil reptile bankers and glowing space parents, but that contradiction actually reveals the secret to this whole phenomenon. It's not about the aliens at all. It's about what we need the aliens to represent for us.
The academic sociology sources break this down brilliantly. The Anunnaki myth, in all its fractured forms, acts as a pristine mirror reflecting genuine, profound contemporary anxieties. People are literally projecting their real-world fears onto these ancient gods.
Let's look at the core elements of Sitchin's story and see what they reflect. First, you have Nibiru, a planet with a failing toxic atmosphere and a desperate race trying to engineer a solution to survive.
Yeah, that is a direct, visceral reflection of our own terror regarding environmental collapse. We are watching our own planet struggle. We are reading headlines about climate change, microplastics, and resource depletion.
And we feel entirely helpless to stop it.
We do. So, a massive mythology about another species desperately trying to save their dying planet feels intensely relevant. It resonates because it's our fear, just projected into the stars.
Then you examine the core premise of the forbidden message itself, the absolute certainty that governments, the Vatican, and scientific institutions are actively hiding the truth about human origins and impending doom to maintain their power.
That perfectly captures modern political alienation. People look at the news, they watch the political theater, and they feel a massive, suffocating wave of distrust. It feels like the systems are rigged, and the people in charge are actively working against the public interest.
The idea that there is a hyper-competent, secretive global elite suppressing the true history of the world kind of validates that distrust. Honestly, for a lot of people, it is much easier to believe the government is hiding an alien apocalypse than to accept the terrifying reality that the government is just chaotic, fragmented, and incompetent. A conspiracy implies control, incompetence implies chaos.
That is spot on. Which leads directly to the third, perhaps most intimate anxiety reflected in the myth: the fear of technology and our place in the economic machine. Sitchin claimed the Anunnaki bioengineered humans as a hybridized slave race specifically designed to do their grueling mining work.
That is the most potent metaphor for modern life in the entire mythology. Think about how uneasy society is right now regarding artificial intelligence, biotechnology, genetic manipulation, and corporate overreach. We constantly feel like we are losing our humanity to the algorithms.
Complete.
Millions of people feel like expendable cogs in a massive, uncaring corporate machine, grinding away at meaningless jobs just to generate wealth, basically metaphorical gold, for billionaires who live entirely separate lives.
We are the hybridized workers.
Exactly. It's incredibly ironic, but almost poetic. The ancient Sumerian Igigi gods burned their tools and mutinied because they were exhausted by the grueling labor required to keep the system running. Thousands of years later, we are sitting at our computers inventing elaborate stories about alien overlords because we feel alienated and exhausted by our own modern labor systems. The underlying anxiety hasn't changed a bit in 4,000 years. We've just recast the characters.
That connection is profound. And all of these individual anxieties, environmental, political, technological, they all culminate in what sociologists define as the meaning crisis.
The meaning crisis.
Yes, we are living in an increasingly secularized, hyper-connected yet deeply fragmented world. Global pandemics, rapid economic crashes, the unrelenting speed of technological shifts. It just feels like history has no direction, and no one is steering the ship.
We are totally adrift in an indifferent universe.
But the Anunnaki narrative, despite its dark and often apocalyptic nature, provides a grand teleological framework.
Let's ground that term for the listener. Teleological. Teleology is basically the explanation of phenomena by the purpose they serve, rather than by postulated causes. It gives history a definitive direction, a purpose, an end goal.
Yes. The mythology offers a bizarre, dark form of psychological comfort. Because if the Anunnaki genetically engineered us, then we aren't just a random accidental byproduct of blind Darwinian evolution.
We have a reason for being here.
We have a specific origin. We were designed. And even if the current world is being manipulated by shape-shifting reptilians or threatened by an approaching rogue planet, at least someone is in control.
Right.
It imposes a rigid order on the terrifying chaos of reality. It means humanity is part of a grand cosmic destiny, even if that destiny involves an apocalypse.
At least someone is in control. I think that is the emotional anchor holding all of this together. The dark comfort of a controlled nightmare is preferable to the existential dread of a random, meaningless universe. It completely explains why pointing out a translation error will never convince a believer.
You cannot debunk a feeling with a fact. Right. When you tell someone that Zecharia Sitchin mistranslated the Sumerian word Shem, you aren't just correcting a minor historical detail, you are threatening the entire architectural framework that gives their chaotic world meaning, order, and purpose.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today for you, traveling from the mud of the Fertile Crescent to the algorithms of YouTube. Let's synthesize this journey. We started with the academic reality. The authentic Anunnaki were earthbound deities of ancient Mesopotamia. They were flawed, physical, bureaucratic managers of nature who required human labor to maintain the cosmic order, the me.
Right. They possessed absolutely no concept of the end of the world. Their religion was dedicated entirely to maintaining the present.
Then we examined the mutation. In the 1970s, Zecharia Sitchin stripped these gods of their historical context, misused linguistic data, and transformed them into gold-mining ancient astronauts from the 12th planet, Nibiru. He claimed they bioengineered humanity as a slave race.
And by assigning Nibiru a 3,600-year orbit, Sitchin inadvertently wound a chronological clock, guaranteeing that the past would become an apocalyptic prophecy for the future.
And from there, the theory entered the digital cultic milieu, where it shattered into countless contradictory narratives. On one side, you have the paranoia of David Icke's reptilian globalists feeding on human fear. On the other side, you have the New Age starseeds awaiting DNA activation from benevolent galactic federations.
But binding all of this together is the tantalizing, deeply human craving for a forbidden message, a secret knowledge that promises a dramatic, world-ending reset to a complicated life.
Understanding the architecture of this specific myth is vital for navigating the modern world. We live in an ocean of digital information where algorithms actively push sensational, emotionally resonant claims to the forefront of our attention. Dissecting the Anunnaki phenomenon is basically a masterclass in developing what scholars call epistemic resilience.
Yes, the ability to evaluate the mechanisms of truth and recognize when your own psychology is being targeted.
Exactly. When you understand exactly how these modern myths are constructed, how they rip ancient texts out of context, how they utilize the forbidden label to immunize themselves against logic, and how they weaponize your genuine anxieties about the environment, corporate labor, and political corruption, you build intellectual armor.
When you recognize that a hypnotic YouTube video isn't revealing hidden history, but is instead actively preying on your deep desire to possess secret knowledge and make sense of a chaotic world, you can step back. You can appreciate the sheer creative fascination of the mythology without surrendering your critical thinking to it.
When you look at this entire phenomenon, the truly provocative question isn't whether Nibiru is real. It's why we look up at the night sky and desperately want to find an instruction manual. We want to find a hidden blueprint in the stars, or a secret message buried in a clay tablet that finally explains why the world is so hard. We spend so much time and energy searching for an alien architect, a genetic master plan, or impending prophecy to absolve us of the heavy, terrifying responsibility of figuring out this world on our own. But what if the most terrifying and simultaneously the most empowering truth of all isn't forbidden or hidden in a vault? What if there is no grand extraterrestrial architect pulling the strings? What if there is no predetermined prophecy dictating our fate? And what if there is no alien savior coming in a spaceship to fix our climate, cure our politics, or upgrade our DNA? The future isn't encoded in a 5,000-year-old piece of clay. It's unwritten, and it is entirely up to us.